Well, the variables did come into play in the end. 16, 17 laps from the end of the race, it started to rain. Of course, nobody knew how hard it was going to rain. Nobody knew for how long it was going to rain. For Max Verstappen, at the front of the race, a difficult call. What he didn't want to do, what he needed to avoid at all costs, was coming in for a new set of tyres. He'd started on the medium, so it was obviously due for a new set of hard tyres. What he didn't want to do is come in for a new set of hard slicks and then 2 laps later have to come in again for intermediates. That would have been disastrous. And so he ran for as long as he could in the semi-wet on the old mediums, 55 laps it was, and then he switched to intermediates at exactly the right moment. 1 pit stop, medium to intermediate, job done. Win by 22 seconds, 25 seconds effectively over Fernando Alonso, who didn't do what Max did. He came in 1 lap earlier, he'd started on the hard tyre to switch to mediums, possibly a logical choice, thinking that a new set of mediums, even if it's semi-wet, might work until the track dries out again. But it was so wet by then that he had to come in the following lap and switch to intermediates. So as I say, that was the end of the challenge from Fernando. Still a very, very good drive to finish second with 2 pit stops to Max's 1. But ultimately, what a day for Max Verstappen. Drove perfectly, hit the guardrail at one point, got on the radio towards the end saying, I've just touched the guardrail, check the tyre pressures. But apart from that, he was as quick as he needed to be at any stage of the race, leaving enough margin to be able to do the job, but equally being very, very fast when he had to be. And the car control that Max showed when there was no pressure on him at all, and he was on intermediates and the car was well balanced, coming out of Portier, it would be just a flick of this, flick of that, just on top of the car. Wonderful to watch. Don't often see Max out of line these days, so it was quite fun watching him on the intermediates at the end, I thought. So yeah, another exceptionally good win for Max on a day when a million things could have gone wrong, because this is Monaco. This is the Monaco Grand Prix. You can make a terrible start or things can go wrong. You can be too long waiting for the field to catch you as you're sitting there on the grid on the pole. I mean, he was there forever. I don't know how hot that Red Bull was by the time the lights went out. But yeah, he got the inside run down into Sound of Vote. Fernando was quite good, crowded him a little bit on the left. But it was a clean start by Max, and that was the job. Led up the hill and then gradually pulled away. It was a joy to watch, really. Really impressive drive by Max. Wish I could say more about it, other than to emphasize what I was talking about yesterday, how good he is at shortening the corners, how good he is at getting the front end to work, to manipulate the front end when other drivers might encounter understeer. Max has got this incredible feel, this incredible balance with everything that he's doing with the steering and throttle and the brakes to keep the car on that stable platform. Just looked amazing. One thing probably worth adding, based on what Shub was saying, based on what some other drivers are also saying, absolutely astonished that Max got the pole as he did with that Sector 3 performance, was that even more amazing is he did it with the amount of anti-dive they're running on the Red Bull, because it is taking some of the sensitivity away, as Shub pointed out in the video on Friday. And there is some suggestion that's possibly what caught Sergio out going into Sound of Vote in qualifying. But who knows? I mean, obviously it's only a comparison within the Red Bull anyway. But one thing's for sure, if they've got less feel with anti-dive, whatever Max does with the car, whatever he's doing to manipulate the car, to get that short corner and to get the rotation exactly when he wants it, at the moment of least possible downside, it's not a problem for him, even with the anti-dive in the car. And the anti-dive obviously has a lot of other benefits in terms of the aero platform on the car. So just a fabulous drive by Max Verstappen. I don't see how you could not give him the driver of the day vote, but indeed it did go, and I don't feel bad about this at all, to Esteban Ocon, who drove superbly in qualifying and superbly in the race. Very good in defence, massive amount of pressure from Carlos Sainz early on, to the point where they touched. Carlos damaged the front wing, and that was kind of the end of his real challenge, and he had a few issues later on the intermediates as well. But just an impenetrable barrier that Esteban Ocon put up. Not that difficult to do around Monaco, but a lot of good people behind him. You know, the Ferraris, Lewis, George, all sorts of really good people. And he just kept his head and drove beautifully. And he started on the medium, but made a stop much earlier on than Max, because I think the Alpine probably is a little bit tougher on its tyres. And anyway, it was a good call, given everything that was going on around him. Gave him a couple of very good free laps when he came out of the pits on a new set of hard tyres. And then he went to the intermediates with 17 to go, like virtually everybody else in the field, and kept it on the island, did really well. And Lewis and George finished 4th and 5th in the revamped Mercedes. Much joy on the radio after the race about, wow, this was amazing, what a result. Yeah, keep it going, boys. You have to say, you know, without all the mods, the standard 14, would they have been fourth and fifth? They probably would. But anyway, Mercedes feel pretty confident. You get that from the tone of voice of the messages that they're stepping in the right direction. So that's a good thing. We'll see for sure in Barcelona. Obviously, it's a completely different sort of test, different sort of circuit. And it's less than a week away. This was supposed to be a triple header. Of course, Imola was cancelled, so it's a double header. And Lewis drove well, but couldn't get past Esteban Ocon in the Alpine. So again, to put it into perspective, you could say, yes, Mercedes making progress. On the other side of the coin, they got beaten by Alpine. And if you'd said that 2 years ago, everybody would have laughed. If you'd said that last year, everybody would have laughed. But here's Alpine doing a very, very solid job and finishing ahead of both factory Mercedes drivers. So again, full marks to everything that Otmar and the guys are doing at Alpine at the moment, despite the negative comments of Laurent Rosset, about which I spoke yesterday. He seemed pretty much, he seemed a different man before the race. Suddenly my driver's in third place. But I think, as I said yesterday, you've got to assume that the powertrain deficiency that Renault for sure have was kind of neutralised by Monaco. Not completely, but was neutralised. I think they'll suffer again from that 0.2, 0.3 disadvantage in Barcelona. So yeah, very good performance from Mercedes. Both cars came home. Good calls to get onto the tyres when they did. The same can't be said, sadly, for Ferrari Charles Leclerc, who looked pretty good despite that 3-place grid penalty for impeding Lando in qualifying. Started quite well. I was hoping, possibly naively, that he would, like Max, stay out for as long as possible, because he's got the talent, he's got the ability to be able to do a couple of laps in the semi-wet on slicks and then go to intermediates at exactly the right moment. And in theory, gain track position doing that. But Ferrari, again, I think brought him in at the wrong time, too early, and he had to make those 2 stops. So a bit of a shame for Charles. I think that was an opportunity again when he could possibly have been somewhere near the podium. The only thing I wouldn't say in mitigation of that, of any decision that Freddie might have been involved with, Freddie Vasseur, is that maybe the Ferrari on slicks in the semi-wet is a much more difficult car to drive than an Aston Martin or a Red Bull. So from their point of view, even if they knew the rain was coming, it wasn't really something around which they could play. It wasn't a variable where they could say, oh, well, let's stay out as long as possible. We'll do a couple of laps, see what the other guy does. In Ferrari's case, they were probably thinking, you know, we'll come in for intermediates, thank you very much, as soon as it's wet. But in the meantime, we'll make sure the tyres are working as well as they could. So there was probably a bit of that. But I think if you've got Charles Leclerc as one of your drivers, you would take a bit of a risk and see whether you can extend that stint into the beginning of the semi-wet, which Ferrari didn't do. I thought rather disappointingly. Pierre Gasly also drove really well, made it a great day for Alpine in Monaco. Started on the opposite strategy to Esteban Ocon, who went medium hard and then intermediate. Pierre went hard, medium, intermediate. Possibly not quite as quick, but nonetheless, he was right there and did a very good job again in the difficult conditions on the intermediates. Carlos Sainz, after his rather fractious race, finished 8th, and the McLarens were 9th and 10th, Lando ahead of Oscar. Lando did 4 laps on the hard, having started on the medium, before he then went to the intermediates. It's a bit of a shame for him as well, but Oscar Piastri got it absolutely right. Another interesting pointer in how much talent this guy's got. He started on the hard and then ran it for as long as he could into the semi-wet, and then went straight to the intermediates, so very good P10 for him. So all in all, a difficult race for Max to win at Monaco. Monaco is never easy, even if it looks as if it's easy, even if there's not a lot of overtaking. It's a very, very difficult race to get right in every dimension. And Max did that. And then the rain came, and that was a completely different thing that he had to deal with. Not so much the driving, but what Fernando was going to do, because the cushion was only about 9 seconds. Once they got into traffic, they both lost a lot of time, but it was around 9 seconds when the rain came. And at that moment, it's very difficult. If you're leading the race, you need, how quick are you going to go? What sort of risk are you going to take? Is Fernando going to be closer? Is he not? And one lap can take quite a long time as well by the time you've got a feel for what your opposition is doing. And I'm speaking about this from Max's point of view. And I thought he did a really good job, because a lot of those things are sort of blind unknowns, and yet everything worked out correctly. Just pure racing driver, and looked very, very cool after the race. Looked as if he hadn't even been driving. And Fernando too, really good. Again, slightly different day for him, because absolutely nothing to lose, lots to gain, could put pressure on Max whenever he needed to, or wanted to, or tried to. And in traffic, could take the odd risk or two to try and get a bit closer. But I think, I was a bit disappointed that Fernando came in when he did, when the track was a little bit greasy. I'd like to have seen him stayed out 1 or 2 laps longer. I say the same things about Charles Leclerc, but even more so about Fernando, because the Aston Martin is a very good car. So you would imagine that Fernando, in the semi-wet on slicks, would have been right up there matching everything that Max was going to do. But as it was, they had to make those 2 pit stops. for Aston Martin, which is a bit of a shame. But yeah, another second place for Fernando, kind of taking it for granted now. They said on the radio to him, oh, you know, next race we'll win it. That's the Spanish Grand Prix in Barcelona, where Red Bull should be unbelievably quick. As for his part, Sergio Perez, who made nonsense of Q1 when he went off at Sainte Devote, started from the back and had a difficult day, as you'd expect. Eventually started hitting people, trying to get past them. Lance Stroll was in there, Kevin Magnussen. It was a really sort of messy back of the field race. And they, towards the end of the race, put on the new set of blue wet weather, full wet tyres that Pirelli are producing now, which run having not been in tyre warmers. It's the new era. And they looked absolutely ice cold skittish. I think Kevin Magnus was out on them as well, and they were just all over the place on them. So I don't know whether they're going to be revising that particular rule or not. But first glance, it didn't look great to have those wets on a car as good as a Red Bull without having first been in the tyre warm. But they're going to have to get rid of tyre warmers at some point. So this was the first time in a long, long while we've seen tyres on a Formula One car that have not been preheated. So that was Monaco, another win for Max Verstappen. On our live stream, somebody, one of the viewers asked the question, is this going to be like 1988 where McLaren won virtually everything? And my answer was probably, but don't forget this is a budget cap era, and if Red Bull have got the championship pretty much sewn up by mid-season, let's say by the August break, the chances are they won't spend any more money on this year's car at all, and everything will be focused on 2024. In which case, some of the other teams, still developing, still looking for answers, still trying to search and go forward, might get a bit nearer to Red Bull towards the end of the year. So I probably it won't be like 1988, but right now it's got that feel to it, it's got that ring to it, and it is. I mean, this was a big win for Max Verstappen, because not only did he win at Monaco, not only did he win with the wet section of the race towards the end, but also Sergio Perez over the same weekend completely blew it as well. And if he had any real threat for the championship, that is now gone. And yeah, what a win. This is a pivotal weekend, I think, for Max Verstappen. Anyway, thanks for watching. A big thanks to Jetcraft and to Pitbox.io. Will I try and do a live stream between now and the Spanish Grand Prix? Maybe. Going to be driving back tonight down to Spain. Not sure how I feel when I get there on Monday or Tuesday. I might do one, I might not. Watch this space is, I guess, all you can do. In the meantime, thanks for watching. Stay safe. See you soon.